Jim Alcoholic. I am so grateful to be here, and I'm right where I should be. This is right where God wants me to be, doing what I need to do to maintain my spiritual condition. You know, my sobriety date is July the 25th, 1971. I've been here a long time. I've been continuously sober. I've saw the good, the bad, the ugly, and there's 160 something people in this Hollywood Squares in this presentation. And the man I'm about to introduce has become someone very special in my life. I heard him talk today on the traditions, and he selected tradition 12 because traditions 12 is all inclusive. And then he did such an amazing, stunning job of covering all 12 traditions. And I sent him a text afterward, and I'm going to share this with you. Wow. Thank you. I am convinced that you are one of God's angels assigned to interact with this recovery fellowship while flying close to the ground. If God can give a voice and words to a donkey, he can provide an angel with a mandate to deliver what needs to be said when it needs to be said to an ear that desperately needs to hear it. If one should check your ID, it would probably say, Angel, first class. I love you, brother. You're going to hear the very best of Alcoholics Anonymous has tonight. I'll give you Bill Swan.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Bill Swan, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad he didn't give me anything to live up to. If you came to hear Kurt tonight, don't all leave at once because I get very self-conscious. But if you can stick around, you'll be much more pleased when you hear Kurt. He's the 11th step. It was read at the beginning of the meeting, and I'm reminded that the steps that we read at any meeting or we see up on the window shades in the room, they are a description of the action taken. And it's interesting when we get into the big book, it says we could be vague about this matter of prayer and meditation, but we're going to make some definite and valuable suggestions. And I was thinking about this today. I was reading when we retire at night, and it finally dawned on me that there's more significance to the nightly review than I thought. At first, I thought it was asking me if, and it may be, if I had missed anything throughout the day in step 10. But then I realized as I continued to read it, that it may be asking me to revisit what I had to take care of in step 10. Because if I'm making more amends throughout the day on Tuesday than I was on Saturday, I'm going in the wrong direction, and I need to pay attention to what's going on inside of me. My experience has been, if I do not do my nightly review, if I miss it for a day, I might not suffer. But a couple days, and all of a sudden, my morning connection, when I invite God into my mind to direct my thinking, all of a sudden I find out I don't do that. And then what happens is, instead of continuing to watch for in step 10, my selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, I'm very observant of it in your life. And I'm in trouble. What I realize is I've gotten back on the throne. You know, Alice asked, and it's interesting, she asked something to be read, and I'm a big book guy. I love the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe it's the precise instructions on how the first 100 recovered. And I picked the paragraph that talks about prayer out of the 12 and 12. I picked the prayer meditation and self-examination. There's a direct linkage, and if they're practiced independently, they produce great results. My favorite line says, but when interwoven logically together, they produce an unshakable foundation for life. And occasionally, and this is what I love, occasionally we are granted a glimpse of the ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom. Wow. I spoke the other day for Young on a morning meeting, and I said in there I was going to meet with my sister at church, and I almost was going to put it on my phone because that's where I go to that as Bill sees it on Sunday morning. What a phenomenal way to start the day. And I said I wasn't going to church as if I was going there as if God was going to be there unless I brought him with me. but I was going to support my sister because that's where she finds her solace and comfort. And for a while, I was against the church once I had found out that the kingdom was within rather than without. And I decided, you know what, how can I fight them? They didn't do anything wrong. Maybe it was my perception. But I went to support her, and I'm so glad I did because the message was almost the same. And he was talking about the generosity of God. A week ago, he talked about the mercy of God, and he said, sometimes we've been given a misrepresentation of God, that God has more mercy than he would ever have wrath, and that he wants to bestow it. And then he described mercy. It was interesting. He said, it's granting forgiveness when I'm in a position to hurt or harm someone who deserves it. And that's what God does. He grants us perpetual forgiveness. I didn't always know that, but that was brought about by the way that I lived. And then this Sunday, he talked about the glory of God. Unfortunately, Moses did not have the 12 steps, so when he wanted to see an ultimate reality, God said, you can't handle that glory, and he didn't get to see it. And we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and occasionally we can have a glimpse of that ultimate reality. I so appreciate Alice considering me, Kurt referring me. He sent me a text and said he referred me. I've talked to Alice on several occasions over the last year and a half, but on two the specific that I needed to talk, and I was led to her. I don't know why I had her number the first time. I was going through a lawsuit. The next day was mediation, and I was kind of afraid because of what they were going to do to me. And she informed me no one was doing anything to me, that what has been going on has been being done for me. I never knew that kind of thinking. And then, of course, for those who don't know, my mom passed away 38 days ago. And the day or two after, during these arrangements, what had happened is, 5 days later, we had the going away party, I want to call it. We had a going away party for my mom. And some people from the assisted living where she's been, and that's been her residence for the last 4 years or so. A couple of them showed up, and I thought it was so kind. And then one of the aides said, I think your mom had a stroke because I noticed something at lunch. She threw up, and I told the nurse, and he said, I think she had a stroke. And I called Alice, and I said, Alice, I want to call and find out what happened with my mom. And she said, can you change what happened if you did find out? And do you need to know if it brought any negative? And it's just a question I have, but what I've learned here is I get intuition and inspiration, just like it's talked about in the book, and that I knew that I was to call her, and that part of, I think, the 11th step may even be something to do with obeying. And sometimes Jim calls me an angel. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it calls us an agent. I'm going to make this disclaimer right now. I've been in attendance of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous for just shy of 44 years. I have 31 months and a little better of recovery. I say that for two reasons. Number one, it keeps me right-sized. But number two, it lets someone with 2 years know that if you think I'm a prodigy, I am not. I may be closer to being an idiot. But I have seen a demonstration of God's handiwork, and I can't deny it. And my experience is also this. And I've been around people with all myriad times of sobriety and even recovery that have returned to the abyss and drank again. And there seems to be a common theme. If and when they make it back to the room, this is almost without failure the narrative. I can't believe I gave up 17 years, and now I only have 3 days. And what dawned on me is the last thing to go from recovery is our time from our last drink. That's the last thing to go, is our abstinence. But it's all we have left when it goes, so it means it's all I have. It means the only thing. And what I realized, so I want to share some experiences. So I was at a meeting today, and this is I kind of knew I was going to be here tonight, and I thought I would be doing something with the meeting, Alice, before you ever called me. I thought maybe Kurt would ask me to introduce him, because I was here 2 weeks ago, and Marty asked me to introduce him. I don't even know these guys, but a short while. I said, what an honor, and here it was a reverse. Kurt's introducing me in absentia through you, Michelle and Alice. But I was at a meeting today, and there was a new guy, and early in sobriety, and he said his wife, he was going through a divorce, and he didn't want it, but his wife did. And can't she see that I'm not the same guy I was 3 weeks ago? And I thought, what the book says, it's going to take a little more than that, 10 or 20 years of drunkenness to make a skeptic out of anyone. But when it got to me to share, I had a memory of 15 years ago. I was in a meeting, and one of our local guys, Matt, had shared how at 20 years sober, his wife of 18 years wanted a divorce. And he said it was the hardest thing to do because he belonged to a men's group, and there's a lot of testosterone. They're in the trades, a lot of tough guys, And he said, I had to stand up in front of my home group and say that my wife of 18 years asked for a divorce today. And he said his sponsor pulled him aside afterwards, and he said, you are not to say anything derogatory about that woman. You made a vow to marry her in recovery, and we have principles in Alcoholics Anonymous that we live by. And he said for the next 3 years, if she needed something, he would do it for her because he was still the man. He was a roofer. And his wife decided, I forgot to tell you, that she wanted something more. And that's what the grounds for the divorce were. And he did exactly what his sponsor said. And 3 years later, his wife called up and said, I was wrong. They've been together ever since. Something's happening here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and if I follow the dictates of a higher power and the direction of a sponsor, I will get those kind of results. And I told him today, those that have ears, let them hear. And what dawned on me is I've been running around thinking, oh my God, yes, I've been standing in the river for 40 years dying of thirst. But what I didn't realize, and what became crystal clear today, and I don't know why it came today, and it never came any other day other than maybe I was supposed to share this tonight. The master gardener has been planting seeds in me for 40 years. And when I finally got in his presence, they blossomed. I have entered that realm that they talk about in step 10, the world of the spirit. And I love how it says our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. I believe the understanding is of that realm. The effectiveness is in this one. And I love the transition period between 10 and 11. And I want to read it. I don't want you to think I know it by heart, and I don't want to make a mistake. This is being taped. You got to be perfect at this meeting, Alice. So it tells us that much has already been said, and it talks about it. The second step, we start to begin in this sense of this inspiration and God flowing into us. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But I never thought about that, but I've been operating in this realm with 5 senses: sight, touch, taste, sound, smelling. There's a vital sixth sense that sustains me. And it says we must go further. And I think what they're talking about is I go further into the world of the spirit. There's no end, but I go further into that world. I remember being in Jacksonville, Florida. The supplement to the Jacksonville Times came out on a Sunday afternoon that they had discovered the smartest person in the world lived in Jacksonville. I figured they were talking about me, so I went and bought 4 newspapers. I wanted to send them back to Ohio to my family and friends. And they weren't talking about me, obviously. They were talking about a 14 or 15-year-old little boy that lived in Orange Park. And his IQ was so high, the article read, that they didn't have a calibration to test it. He was working on a solution for a cancer that they hadn't named yet. And he was at a doctorate level. And so they thought that there must be something genetic, and they wanted to find out what it was. And when news of this got on the press, the reporters went to the house to find out. And sure enough, the father was either a physicist and the mother was a doctor of something, medicine, or vice versa. But they were very intelligent, so they suspected they were right. And they were interviewing and asking questions. And one of the reporters went to the 15-year-old kid and said to him, "What do you attribute your brilliance to?" He said, "It's real simple." He said, "At night when my mom and dad go to sleep, I sit at God's feet and he shares his thoughts with me." And the reporter said, "What does he look like?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't look, I listen." And I remember saying to myself, how come God never shares his thoughts with me? He's been sharing his thoughts with me for 64 years. What was inside of me was screaming so loud I couldn't hear him if he was standing in front of me. He's been sending me messengers all my life. The Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous has raised me. When Wendy read that Herbert Spencer quote at the end, I kind of changed it with the words you guys gave me and said this: "My closed-mindedness has kept me in everlasting agnosticism," because those are interchangeable terms. One is contempt prior to investigation, which means I got a closed mind, and ignorance. Agnosticism mean the same thing: ignorant of God, ignorant of anything other than what my mind tells me is the only thing. I was so blocked and discovered I never had a problem with step one. The only time I left your side is when I had to do a little time in jail because I violated my probation. Had I known that Alcoholics Anonymous graded our papers the way they do, I'd have probably gotten sober in the church, because if you drink there, they forgive you. In AA, they strip you of all your time. But as my good friend Jim says, there's no tenure here. There's no big shots. There's no small shots. You know the adage, it's one shot and we're all shot. Today, I have a relationship with this power that I never knew was available. It was theoretical. I always thought that step 3 would tell me who to believe in, where he would be on Sunday, what he would do with my life once I surrendered. He'd tell me what his will was. And I didn't realize that it had nothing to do with God. It had everything to do with the life run on self. And if I wasn't convinced that my way wouldn't work, there would be no reason for me to make a decision to quit running my life. Had nothing to do with God and everything to do with self-will. The only thing it said at the end is, guess what? If you agree to quit running your life, some pretty remarkable things might follow. Will follow. A guy said to me after 25 years of trying out for AA, he said, "You know why nothing remarkable ever happens in your life?" He said, "Because you've never sincerely taken the position. The position is one of acquiescing to the power." One of my old sponsors, I've had sponsors, I've had tremendous sponsors. I've had the best sponsors that you can get in AA. Do you know not one of them could relieve the obsession for me to drink when it came upon me? I was listening to Sheldon last night, and he said, we have nothing in Alcoholics Anonymous that deals with the phenomenon of craving. We do not eradicate, we have no steps. Nothing happens where the allergy will ever be eliminated. And I was thinking about it today. We don't have anything that eliminates the obsession. But what we do have is something that treats the spiritual malady that always tends to bring the obsession to life. I never knew that when I was uncomfortable enough in my skin and you look like a threat in the problem, that the only relief I would get was through a drink, because I can't get it from people that I'm afraid of. I can't get it from people that I resent. I used to think that what I thought about you, said about you, or felt about you said a lot about you. And what I found out in step 4 is it said nothing about you. It showed me the condition of my heart. My pastor said, if you're looking for fault, put down the binocular and pick up the mirror. And what I also discovered, and this may be the greatest discovery, it came out of chapter 4, the one that prepares me for the rest, is if you're looking for God, put down the telescope and pick up a pen. I promise you, he'll be at the end of the felt. You'll find him all over that paper. Because what happened is everything that I had pushed inside of me, hoping would never see the light of day, that I was about to share with someone in step 5, was blocking. I believe that we all have spiritual, invisible, umbilical cords that connect to the divine. And what happened is I just filled it up with a bunch of filth, resentment, fear, harms done others, the stuff that we share in step 5, and become entirely ready in step 6 and beg in step 7 for God to take them away. Not because I necessarily want them taken away, but in step 4, I saw how much hurt I did to the people that love me. I was talking about it today. I'm like that character, or was like the character in The Green Mile, when John Coffey was showing Tom Hanks what that Billy did to those 2 little girls. He said he killed them with their love. He told one, if you open your mouth, I'll kill your sister. And he told the other the same thing. And out of love, they didn't say a word, and he mutilated them both. I killed people with their love. I take advantage of people's love, and I use it against them. That's not the way God wants me to live. I could never share that in a meeting. What would you think of me? I couldn't tell you that every relationship I ever entered into ended in a restraining order. I was never the one seeking restraint. It was always them. Had I known what I knew now, had I taken the steps before I got married, one of 2 things would have become crystal clear. I would have called off the wedding because I would have seen that I liked variety. Or I would have asked God to take away my lust, my infidelity, my dishonesty, my selfishness, because I would have seen that it destroyed every relationship that I ever entered into that meant anything to me, and particularly to them. I was making vows and promises that I couldn't keep on my own because lack of power was my dilemma. I was blocked from this power because of resentment, and what flows from that is all this spiritual decadence. We had a lady here named Beth Gordon. She was responsible. Some of you may know her. She's passed. Was a member of our group. She got sober in 72, a year after my good friend Jim. She was responsible for the death of 2 of her children. She shared that she had a powerful message. She said that something had happened. She had a heart attack. She was on the operating table. And she said they said everything was good. They sent the kids home. And then what happened is she flatlined, and for a long period of time, there was no heartbeat. And they didn't know if she was going to come back. But she came back, obviously, because I'm telling you this story. And what she said is, in that time, she had seen blue skies, bluer than she had ever seen, green grass, greener than you could imagine, and a yellow sun that was blazing but not burning. She said, I never saw anything that beautiful in my life. And she said, but what I saw was a boat that was coming towards the shore. There was a man on that boat and 2 little children. And as the boat got closer, she recognized who the man and the 2 little children were. One was her husband who had passed. He had stuck with her till the end. She described that he would go and visit the daughter that she couldn't take care of, that regressed back to a 1-year-old and was in assisted living till she died at 12. She said, I never went and saw her. I drank through that. The other one was stillborn because she told herself, it's okay. The drinking won't hurt anything. And she said the self-deceit, the delusion of alcoholism. But she said her husband came and wrapped her arms around him and said, Beth, you can't come yet. Your work's not done. But we're waiting for you, and we love you, and we'll be here when you get here. And here's what she said. There's forgiveness in Alcoholics Anonymous for the alcoholic. This is God's celebration. Thank God for AA. There's forgiveness here. All I have to do is, what do you guys say? Uncover, discover, whatever terms you guys used, and get rid of it. Share it with someone. You know, it dawned on me that my concept of God must be wrong. Because if God was who I thought he was, which means he'd be in my image and likeness, then I would never have to tell anyone in the fifth step. I'd go right to God. But I don't believe God keeps track of all that. I think we do, and we tell each other so that it lessens the pain, relieves the guilt, shame, and remorse. I truly believe that God is love. I gave the definition of love at a discussion meeting once early in sobriety, and I said, we love everything. If someone comes in and tells you they were a serial killer, we love you, keep coming back, you're the best of your past friends and all that. We use that word, and I said, do we really know what it means? And I went, and I think I got a reliable source for the definition. And I went under 1 Corinthians. I'll just tell you, it wasn't Webster's, it was the Corinthian version of the dictionary. And it started giving the evidence, the fruits of love. That love was patient, love was kind, it was long-suffering, it didn't envy, it didn't boast, it didn't delight in evil. I said, oh my God, I have none. I do all the opposite of what love is. No wonder I'm so blocked from this power. But I remember getting down to the 7th stanza, and this hit me like a ton of bricks. It says, love keeps no record of wrongs. When I did a 4th step, I realized that I had been keeping record of wrongs from what I thought everyone did to me. All the wrongs that I had did to others that were holding me back and blocking me from the sunlight. Keeping records of everything. And guess what? My 8th step list was a record of the things I needed to take care of. And in step 9, and I'm not done with step 9, I don't want to fool you, I caused a lot of damage, most of it in the fellowship of AA. I owe a lot of amends in the state of Florida. I'm in Ohio right now. When I was here, I got to spend the last 31 months with my mom, visiting her, and that's where she would want me. And now that she's passed on to her realm in the sky, I don't know if she's at an Al-Anon meeting, you know what I mean? She's just jumping for joy. I promise you, there were times my mom had more gratitude for Alcoholics Anonymous than I'll ever have. But guess what? I'm free. And in that, she gets to thank the Creator who gave us Alcoholics Anonymous. In step 9, as I make amends and cross them off the list, eventually, if I'm willing and God allows it, there can be no record or any evidence. I believe the first 9 steps are designed to put this world the way it was before I got here, because I messed it up pretty good. 10, 11, and 12, I believe, allow me to make it a better place. I get to help others today. I got a lot of sponsees. I made this statement the other day. And I think I might have said I get lonely, and I don't think it was loneliness, because I don't get lonely. But sometimes I think I'd like a companion. You know, this is like Facebook, though. I see so many beautiful women on here. I get married 15 times a day in my mind. My imagination has been fired at last. But I said to myself this, I don't know if I'm willing to give up what I finally got. It talks about it in the book. My pick has finally struck gold. I'm not trying to hug the treasure to myself. I'm insisting on giving away the entire product. But relationships take time and effort. And God has groomed me and kept me alive so that I could come and share some of those stories. My God. It's only 8:36. How long do I talk for? I want to tell 2 more stories, Alice, which I believe just really 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay.
John?
Yeah, you got 10 minutes, Bill. I'll give you a 5-minute.
You got it, John. So I got out of the Salvation Army, I want to say in 2002. It might have been 2001, but I ended up there drinking, so don't hold me to the year. But when I got out, I went to work and I met these customers. And for some reason, I was just moved with compassion, the love that they had for each other. And I started crying in front of my customer. And the guy asked me why I was crying. I said, because I just appreciate the love you two have for one another. And at that time, when I was doing good, I was sober, obviously. That's how I held a job. He said, Mr. Swan, you are a man of God. Would you come over to our house for Christmas dinner? I had nowhere to go. I said, absolutely. His name was Matthew Trevisano. And he had me over for dinner. And I do what I do most of the time. We had a conversation, which means I talked, and I was in sales and they were mesmerized, so they let me. And after I got done eating and talking, I said, I've got to go to a meeting now. And he said, can I tell you a story for a minute? And I said, sure you can. And he said, I want to tell you about my daughter. I didn't know he had a daughter. It was me, his wife, and his son. And he said, we lived in California. It was the 1950s. He said, we lived 4 blocks off the ocean. And he said, when my daughter was 13 or 14, sometimes she would walk out to the beach, take off her shoes, walk home, and then cut up and walk up the beach and then come home. He said she was a cheerleader. She was a gymnast. He said she had blonde hair and blue eyes. He said when she was turned 15, she got real sick, Bill. He said we took her to the hospital. I don't know what was out in the 50s, but it was deadly. And he said we never left her side for 11 days, Bill. He said on the 10th day, she said to me, Daddy, if I was a bird, I would fly out the window to heaven. And he said, I knew she was going to die. And he said, I brought the priest in for last rites. Do you think I did the right thing? What was I going to say? I said, of course you did, Trib. And he said she died the next morning, and that was 1956. And then he said this. He said, but you should see her. He said, she's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and she's doing cartwheels. You should see her. And I thought to myself, she died 4 years before I was born. How could I see her? And then I got the message. That little girl was just as alive, maybe more so than I was at that moment. She was alive in his heart. The master said the kingdom is within. The reason I had no vision of that or any memories of that is because I had nothing but resentment, decadence, violating spiritual principles that lived inside of my heart. It was black. Alcoholics Anonymous, through these steps, has allowed me to clean it up. The last story I tell, I was 10 years old. This is the kind of kid I was. There was something wrong with me. I gave booze a bad name. Me and my brother were in a pinball tournament. He was a year younger than me. I had no dexterity, very clumsy, uncoordinated, so I was knocked out quickly. My brother ended up playing for first and second place. And in my heart, I wanted him to lose. He was my flesh and blood. But if he won, then I would be something less than him. That's the kind of sickness that I possessed before I ever drank, because fear dominated my life. Well, I want to let you know it in one stint in my sobriety. My nephew, my brother's only son, was wrestling and preparing to go to state. And I was a part of that experience. I had been estranged from my daughter for a long time. The judge had taken away my rights because of my behavior and alcoholism. But I was allowed to be in this life. And when we were down in the last match he had to win to go down to Columbus for state, it was 0-0 with 15 seconds left. My nephew escaped, and he got a point for that. And I was so excited. I went out onto the mat. The referee said, if you don't get his father off the mat, I'm taking that point away. The coach said, that ain't his father. That's Uncle Fester. He just got out of prison. You get him off the mat. Well, anyhow, he won, and we went to state, and I was a part of life at last. My previous sponsor before Ralph was Larry. If I'd make a phone call to Larry's house and say, how are you doing? He would say, as of right now, I'm doing this or this. I said, why do you always say as of right now, Larry? He said, because that's how I'm doing as of right now. He said, because we all have those phone calls or knocks on the door 5 minutes from right now that change our life. On May 17th, 7 years ago, I got one of those phone calls. My nephew laid brain dead on a gurney in the Cleveland Clinic. An overdose on fentanyl. And the reason that his brain was dead was not just because he suffocated from the loss of respiration, but because he fell on his back and fell asleep in his own vomit for 4 years, and the asphyxiation was taken in. It gets real then. it gets real when you go to the hospital and a Lifeline's calling and they want to know what type of blood he has and how his organs. And my brother said, don't call here no more. Is there really one who has all power? The faith that I profess, the theoretical God, the spiritual life that was a theory, how can I draw on that? So I came to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every day I asked for prayers. I had people all over the world praying for that little boy. After 17 days with no improvement, I broke down in front of my mom and cried. I said I would deserve the pain that this is going to bring to my brother. He was a good kid. He's taken care of me all my life. I said, God, I'll trade places with that little boy. I've wasted my life. He's just started. Thank God for unanswered prayers. We have some people who stand on the Word of God, a living Word of God with the relationship with God. It wasn't prayers, but it was professions of God's Word because it can't return void. And 8 days later, God restored that little nephew to life. He celebrated 7 years of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous on May the 17th of this year. There's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now, because that's all that he lives is in the now. Thank you so much for saving my life all these years. I apologize for the disrespect and disdain I showed you, but you understood I was sick. And like the Master said on the cross, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Isn't that where our four-step prayer came from? God save me from being angry. These are sick people. Thank you for my life.
Service. Bill, thank you for a beautiful, beautiful lead. I want to encourage people to put their hands up, and as Teresa always says, let's get more out of Bill. Let's squeeze more out of Bill. Bill, I love that you talked about I am growing in understanding of the spirit world, and I'm growing in effectiveness of this world. I mean, I really appreciated your share. Lil, you are up, my friend. Come on in.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. That was fantastic. Here's my question for you. If you had more time, which story would you also tell?
I don't know that there is any more story to tell. I mean, I've seen so much. That's just what came to mind. I've seen 40 years of miracles. And I said this once, Alice, I felt like I was standing outside of the fishbowl. I wanted to come into AA, sitting right, like I said, sitting there, but just there was something separating us. I didn't know that the door I was looking for was on the inside. So I don't know. Come back, you'll hear another story. I told a bunch of stories Sunday. I don't want to repeat myself.
Thank you, Lil, for the question.
I'm sorry.
No, this is beautiful. Vera, you're up.
Hi, Vera, grateful recovered alcoholic. Bill, thank you so much for your share. So powerful. Something that really stuck out that you said was spiritual invisible umbilical cord with a connection to the divine. It's just so powerful. I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned no one is doing anything to me. What is going on is being done. Into the tying that into the mercy that you were talking about at the beginning, and saying that it's forgiveness, being in the position to not hurt or harm someone when they actually deserve it, right? Can you tell me how you've gone about doing that in terms of, okay, nothing's being done to you, or no one is doing anything to you. What's going on is being done for me, because I'm just like, with that harm of wanting to do harm, right? But wanting to live a spiritual program. So like, what is it like? What am I supposed to learn? What is the answer? I guess that makes sense.
Alice can probably explain that better, but here's where the example came from. I was left in a state by this guy that had taken care of me for 30 years. I had a sponsor that I treated like I treated everyone else in my life. He bent over back. He laid down his life for me, and he left me in a state. But he had a son And a guardian got involved because I let up on my duties because I couldn't take care of him drinking and doing my thing. And the DCF got involved. And what happened is he was estranged from his son because his son didn't do anything. He kind of left him alone, and I took care of him the last 4 years of his life to the best of my ability. But all of a sudden, I realized that he had a son. And although I could have fought for all the estate, what I did is I let go and let God and let his son have his rightful inheritance regardless of how his dad felt, because his dad was coming down with dementia, and part of dementia is they get angry towards the people they love. And rather than be selfish and hang on to something, even though that was David's wish, I conceded and let his son have what I would want if my father had left me something. I think that's it. I granted mercy rather than justice. That makes sense? Okay.
Thank you. What a beautiful answer, Bill. Jim, I'm so excited you have a question. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, you're muted again. That was me. Sorry.
Jim, an alcoholic. I'm pretty emotional right now. And I get pretty emotional every time I listen to Bill. You see, I was an atheist, and I knew there was no God, and now I don't believe in God. I know there's a God because while I haven't seen God, I have seen God's work in hundreds of people's lives. I can tell you the last prayer that God answered. I can even tell you the prayer that God's working on now. I have a close relationship with God. But my question is this, Bill. Do you have any idea how much better my spiritual condition? You've heard me talk about going to the wall and using that last kit, that last tool in the kit. I'll get drunk tomorrow, but I won't get drunk today. And you've helped me to restore the spiritual. Do you know how much better my life is as a result of God bringing you to my life? That's my question.
I suspect that the answer is yes, Jim, or I would offend you. But I will say this. It's very difficult. If I wasn't doing what I was doing, a guy told me 3 years ago, you might have to stop lying to get honest. And you might have to stop stealing. And that's a fact. And I did it. Some things, when a surrender took place at 9 months and 3 days sober, I was surrendered. I was crushed by God, not by myself anymore, because there was no way out of the life I created. So to speak at this meeting, I got very nervous when she asked. To speak at the meeting I spoke at the other day, I didn't feel worthy of it. And someone said, "Oh, that's false humility. You take great joy in demeaning yourself." And I said, there's a line in Bill's story where he said, vestiges of my pride, even after the experience, remained with him for a while. You can't come to AA and live the way I did for 40 years and then 2.5 years later think that you follow what I'm saying. But I come anyhow, and I show up and I share where I'm at, and I know how I'm living today. And for the first time in my life, I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in impeccable standing. So I show up, I say, yes, I know I have nothing of value to say is what my mind says. I open my mouth, and whatever comes out is supposed to be said. It's going to take a little while to come out of that forest, believe me. But I'm doing it day at a time. So yes, Jim, I know that your life is better, as mine is, because of you. Sometimes I wonder who the real benefactor is here, though, young man.
What a great answer, Bill. What a great answer. Jenna, you're up.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I was late, and when I logged in and I
What's
heard
your
Bill.
name?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Jenna. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. Thank you. How profound. So normally, like Zoom meetings, I'm not here listening, but you sucked me in right away. And It was very profound. And I find myself wanting to ask you, how you knew that God was in your life. How did you know? And I mean, I'm newly sober. I'm only just over a year. And maybe I'm questioning this. I'm getting emotional already. Do you just know? Did you just know?
No, absolutely not. In spite of all those miracles that I saw, the book tells me that I'm incapable of remembering the suffering and pain about 30 days ago. One day it dawned on me, I forget all those miracles too, as if God has to reprove himself to me. But at 9 months and 3 days sober, I was 62 years old, and I realized that I had a whole lot more life behind me than ahead. I drank up my 20s, my 30s, my marriage, my fatherhood, my employability, my sanity in the 40s and 50s. What was going to be different now? And I came out with a plan to end my life. And before I could execute the plan, I saw a vision of the ultimate reality. God showed me something. And there was some talks that I listened to because I took a job. I was an overachiever. I took a job at a restaurant 3 days a week washing dishes. I had really done some damage. That's about all I could do. And what I did is I listened to the talks of all the AA speakers that I would never listen to before because I don't want to hear their success because it wasn't mine. I would discount them. And Bob Darrell told a story about a Donatello sculpture that was in a museum in Italy. And it was of the Magdalene Mary, but it was not like one that you saw in church. It said it looked like the life that she lived. Her teeth were broken. Her skin was tethered. It said it looked like she had turned $5 tricks in the back alley of Jerusalem. But directly across of her was a sculpture of Jesus and something in her eye as if to say, could this be for me? And what had happened is all the miracles, some which I told you today, paraded through my mind before I could carry out this plan, and something inside of me said, God, could this be for me? I said, I don't know if you're there, and if you're not, I'm doomed. But if you are, I'll do anything. And 5 days later, a fourth step had come out of me. I held the pen, and he did the writing, and my life changed. I know he's real. I know he's real.
Thank you, Bill. I want to just, for anybody who's brand new or who's here and you're not sure, Bill talked about it. He talked about standing in the river, dying of thirst. He talked about being here for 41 years and having 31 months. All things are possible. Bill, thank you for a beautiful, beautiful answer. Pip, you're up.
Hi, my name's Pip, and I'm a grateful alcoholic up at nearly 2 a.m. here in the UK. And it's beautiful to be here, and thank you so much for all who do service at this meeting. And Bill, it was amazing, and I love it when because I was here to see Kurt, and then it's like God's got this planned instead, and that's always God's will when it's like the unexpected and because we have our plans. So yeah, I'm riding that wave with you. Practical question about the nightly inventory. So when I'm doing that really well, they do just sort of follow on. So my nightly inventory will almost sort of be like a shopping list or a to-do list or a must contact this person list. And it's really lovely when they're used like that. Yeah, well, we kind of loving toward all, and I've got circled all. You know, it's the people that are not drunkards and they're in the supermarket and they're in front of you and getting in your way. You know, am I kind and loving amongst them when people are getting in my way? And it's things like that, you know, we can do it. We can miss it though. And so that's exactly what it's for. It's finding ways that we can grow. But yeah, practically, how do you do yours? Is it because there's things like spiritual toolkit, or do you just do it on a pad of paper or just in your head? And that's my question. Thanks.
A lot of times I'll tell you, most of the time it's in my head. But like I said, God's constantly disclosing more. I never considered that it's important that I revisit the 10th step because it's asking me to review that. But there are times when I have to sit down and write when self gets in the way. because I can know that I get a knot in my gut and all of a sudden I start to think you're the problem, but I don't know where it happened. Where did the fear creep in? Because you're never the problem. You're just the opportunity for me to see in you what I can't see in myself. So I answered the questions. At first, I answered them all wrong and thought I was doing good. Said, were you selfish? I said, yeah. Were you resentful? Of course. I thought I was getting an A till I realized that was not the right answer. But believe me, when they say a clear conscience makes a soft pillow, it's very rare. But the most important thing, Pip, and I forgot to mention it, but you asked a question that brought it up. The nightly review stops me from carrying today into tomorrow. I had carried 60 years of yesterdays into today. There was no peace. And what happens if I did miss something in the 10th step? I can clean it up unless it's too late and I take care of it in the morning, but it's real simple. And if not, what happens is it starts to block me again and I lose all touch with that. Thank God for 10, 11, and 12. Without those, I'd be doomed.
Thank you, Bill. Victor, we're out of time, but please jump on in with a quick question. And Bill, would you give a quick answer?
What an order.
I might be able to do it, but I'm a chatty Cathy type. Yeah, it's been illustrated to me to love oneself because God does not make mistakes. And so I hope and pray that here everyone in the room was, as I was, absolutely blessed and enthralled with every word that came out of your mouth because it was your truth. And do you love yourself today? But that's an unfair question. So leave it to God. I love you all, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, you have any last words before I turn it back to Michelle?
Just thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
I love you, and I'm thrilled that you said
And
yes.
thank you for being there for me. Yes, thank you too.
Absolutely.